Hello, everyone, and welcome to Module 1's assignment preview. I'm Dr. Point, and I will be your course facilitator. I've had 20 plus years of research experience in healthcare, and I am super excited about this course. Now, during Modules 1, 2, and 3 of the course, I plan to post PowerPoint presentations offering suggestions on ways in which you can maximize your point values for each of your assignments. Now, an important note, throughout the assignments in this course, you will develop a research proposal on a professional concern related to health and wellness. Please make sure that you review the suggestions that I post on your papers and integrate those suggestions into your draft that you will be submitting in Module 4. You will compose a paper for your Module 1 assignment. It's going to be essay format following APA guidelines, which will contain the following sections: an introduction, an area of professional concern, problem statement or hypothesis, research questions, and a conclusion. Now remember, for all of your assignments in this course, you will be required to include an introduction, conclusion, and sources. I do want to offer, like, for instance, the first suggestion that I will make is that I've noticed that many students still use the word introduction as their header when they're submitting an essay. Now, remember, in your rubric, there is a criterion that focuses on APA guidelines. So it will negatively impact your grades if you're using introduction because it doesn't align with APA formatting guidelines. Now, I'll read this specifically, and this is directly from the APA. This is verbatim. It says, because the first paragraphs of a paper are understood to be introductory, the heading introduction is not needed. Do not begin a paper with an introduction heading. The paper title at the top of the first page of text acts as a de facto level 1 heading, and that's verbatim from the APA. So in other words, instead of using the word introduction as your header, use the title of your research. For instance, if you are going to submit a proposal for childhood obesity, then your header should be childhood obesity, not introduction. Now, your introduction should include the scope, the topic that you're going to be covering, what is the issue, then the context. Give some data, give some statistics, anything to support the importance of your topic. And then you want to talk about why your topic is important. This is your overall paper's introduction. Okay, this is the introduction for your entire essay. Then you're going to go into another section where you're going to have a brief paragraph, and then you're going to introduce your problem statement or your hypothesis. Now, your problem statement, for this purposes of this course, what I'd like for you to do is to focus on a problem statement if your proposal is going to be qualitative in nature. Focus on a hypothesis if your proposal is going to be quantitative in nature. Okay, it just makes it simple. And it also keeps it straightforward for any new researchers. Okay, so the problem statement for your qualitative proposal, you must explicitly state it. What I will be looking for when I grade is a statement such as, the general problem to be addressed in this study is the blank, and the specific problem is. Okay, I'm going to look for something like that, or something like, the problem statement for this particular study. I'm going to be looking for something that directs me to your problem statement and tells me that this is your problem statement. What I do not want to do is assume the responsibility of looking through your paper and trying to decide if this is what you mean for your problem statement, or is that what you meant. So that's why you have to be very explicit. You have to tell me what your problem statement is, and you have to use these words in order to get that point across. So if you're going to be using a quantitative design, you want to look at your hypothesis. Okay, so it must be, again, explicitly stated. I'll be looking for something like, it is hypothesized that, and that's what I'm going to look for in order to determine what your hypothesis is. Okay. Now, when you're formatting your research questions, please keep these in mind. They should be focused on a single problem or issue. We cannot solve the problem of the world, so we're just looking at focusing on a single problem or one issue. It should be researchable using primary and or secondary data sources, right? And then it should be feasible, something that we can answer in a reasonable time frame. It should be specific enough to answer thoroughly. and complex enough to develop the answer over the space of your paper or thesis. And it should not be a yes or no response. It should not be capable of being answered with a yes or no. It should be relevant to health and wellness, okay? Now, this is an example. Is there life after death? This is a very interesting question, but it is not research appropriate. And here's why. It's focused on a single problem, a single issue, a single concern, but is it researchable? If it's not researchable, then that means it is not a research appropriate question. Because no one has ever come back from the dead, there's no way you can do a qualitative study or a quantitative study on it, because you cannot find qualitative data, primary or secondary data, or quantitative data for that matter. Also, it's not complex enough because it can be answered with a yes or no. So keep those things in mind when you're formatting your research questions. Now, the topic that you choose, you get to decide it, because this is something that should be interesting to you. Your job is to align it with health and wellness. So you can go with something like food insecurities and align that with health and wellness. Or you can go with something that's obviously medical related, like childhood obesity. Or you can go with anxiety. You can go with mass shootings. That's a topic that's related to health and wellness. So basically, your job is to decide what's interesting to you and how you align that with health and wellness. Now, research methods. Now, we're thinking ahead because we're not there yet in terms of when you will have to decide whether you're going to go with quantitative or qualitative and the design for each. So you're not there yet. We'll talk about that in the next presentation. I believe it's the next presentation, or it might even be in presentation number 3. But we'll talk about that in a future discussion. But remember the qualities of quantitative and the characteristics of qualitative, right? So quantitative is objective. It deals with numbers, where qualitative is more subjective, and it actually deals with the lived experiences of individuals. So remember, if you're going to be introducing a qualitative proposal, you want to use problem statements. And if you're going to be introducing a quantitative proposal, you want to go with a hypothesis. And this is an example. Okay, so what if my topic is emotional desensitization among teens using social media? And if I wanted to take a qualitative approach, my problem statement, I will give an introductory paragraph. This is not your overall introduction to your paper. This is just for that particular section, your problem statement section. Teenagers are increasingly using social media platforms as a primary means of communication. Current literature shows that 51% of U.S. teenagers spend a minimum of 4.8 hours on social media platforms such as YouTube, X, Instagram, and Facebook each day. As teens get older, they spend more time on social media, with the average time exceeding 5.8 hours daily. Girls represent the highest users of social media according to a July 2023 Gallup poll. The use of social media is not only used by teens as a source of entertainment, but teens also rely on social media to engage in discussion with others, meet new people, and share experiences. The general problem to be addressed in this study is the overutilization of social media by teens. The specific problem is the excessive use of social media, leading to the normalization of behaviors associated with emotional desensitization. Okay, so that's my problem statement. As you can see, I can clearly find that problem statement. Also, if you look in that paragraph above where I'm discussing the problem, you'll see that I have XYZ and ABC. I just threw those in there. But you will, anytime you're using statistics and specific dates, you will always have to have sources. So that's why I wanted to make sure that I just showed you that in a visual. So if I was doing a quantitative approach with my proposal, I would use the same information to introduce my hypothesis. I would say at the end of that information, I would say something like, it is hypothesized that excessive use of social media by teenagers increase the prevalence of emotional desensitization by this demographic. So as you can see, again, I can easily find what the hypothesis is, what the problem statement is. So I need for you to make sure that you are very, very explicit when you're submitting yours as well. Now, your research questions, you want to introduce your research questions by saying the research questions guiding this study are. So my research questions, the examples that I would have is, how does the use of social media affect a teen's ability to demonstrate empathy towards others? What role does excessive use of social media by parents and or guardians play in the increased social media usage by teens? And how does information literacy affect a teen's use of social media? As you can see, none of these are yes or no questions. Each of these are researchable. They are very specific. So these would be considered appropriate research questions. Your conclusion should summarize your entire submission, your entire essay, and all coursework, again, will need to have an introduction and a conclusion. Now, just to recap, please make sure that you submit in essay format. Please do not use first person or second person for this proposal throughout, okay? Because this is something I know that you guys have a lot of experience, and perhaps you're going to be using something that you're very familiar with. And I know the temptation is to say, as a PE teacher, I am well versed in this or something, but you want to take yourself away from the research. So that way, there's no bias and it remains objective. Okay, so unless you're the subject of the research, you want to remove yourself from the research. Okay, please be explicit in stating your problem statement or hypothesis. Please be explicit in stating your research questions. Do not take your grades I'm using the term suggestions, because I don't want people to take it personally when I tell them perhaps you might want to rephrase this sentence. And a lot of times I'm going to do that in this particular course because there are specific phrases that you will use when you're talking about qualitative, specific phrases that you will use when you're talking about quantitative. So don't take it personally. It's never my intention to make it personal. I'm only trying to offer you the best information to support your success goals, okay? And that is it. Thank you so very much. Please let me know if there are any questions, any